Hello guys, welcome back to LR Anime. Today is explanation of Soul Land 2 episode number 74 based on novel. So let's start. Wang Chua shook her head and used her actions to provide the answer to the question. As golden light flashed, an image of a golden dragon appeared on her back. The size of this golden dragon wasn't very large, but it was clear, and seemed almost alive. Its wings flapped open, and it lifted its head proudly. It seemed a little scornful as it looked at the baboon king before opening its mouth to absorb it. The black soul ring started to be engulfed by the golden dragon. The golden light then returned to Wang Chua's body. Wang Chua sat there and didn't move a single inch. A dim golden halo started to emanate from her body. As the golden light surged, it looked like a gentle fog. While her soul power experienced intense undulations, they didn't seem violent. It was plain to see that Wang Chua had suppressed the aura of the baboon king's soul ring, as no sign of it leaked out. Zhong Lushuan was stunned. She knew that she had to look at Wang Chua in a different light from now on. She had thought that her appraisal of Wang Chua was already very high, but right now it didn't seem high enough. It wasn't simple to absorb a 50,000-year soul ring. At least, Zhong Lushuan wasn't certain that she could do it before she became a soul emperor. Even when she absorbed her 100,000-year soul ring, it had been a stroke of fate, and she had had the protection of other, stronger individuals. After that absorption, she had to rest for half a year before she fully recovered. Thus, she was stunned to seeing Wang Chua absorbing the soul ring effortlessly. This was evidently not because of her cultivation, but the strength of her body. Her martial soul also completely suppressed the bloody baboon king. On a spiritual level, the soul ring couldn't struggle at all. She completely overwhelmed the baboon king to complete this fusion. Everyone, please be careful. The smell of blood is very strong, and might attract other soul beasts. Zhong Lushuan warned the rest, and also gestured for Hua Yuhao to activate his spiritual detection. Hua Yuhao took this chance to get busy. First, he moved the baboon corpses 500 meters from where they were. The corpses formed a circle that surrounded all of them. He took an hour to finish this task. Wang Chua's soul power was rising quickly the whole time. As her aura grew stronger and stronger, she evidently reached a critical stage in her fusion. Hua Yuhao was slightly fatigued, and sat cross-legged before he started to meditate. Wang Dong sat opposite him and cultivated with him. When Wu Ming saw Hua Yuhao and Wang Dong, her eyes brightened. "Oh, you two are here. You're here to practice for the competition, right? Come, spar with me. I had a good time watching that fight on the Sea God's Lake. Let me experience the strength of your ice-type domain at close range. How about it?" Han Ruoruo was a little annoyed as she said, "Minga, they just arrived. Can't you act more like a senior?" Wu Ming just answered excitedly, "Sister Ruoruo, you don't know how great they were that day. Even though they are young, they're worthy of respect. You should know Ling Luo Chen, if I'm not wrong. Under Ling Luo Chen's leadership, 1 soul emperor and 4 soul kings fought them. Guess what happened? Total suppression. The 2 of them suppressed the other 5, who had no chance at all. They overwhelmed them right from the start. Between them, one's a soul king and the other's a soul emperor. Tell me, how can I not spar with them?" Han Ruoruo hadn't stayed long enough to watch Hua Yuhao and Wang Dong's fight that day, but she had heard about what had ensued in that particular fight. And listening to Wu Ming's detailed description, she was also quite shocked. Wang Yang was very familiar with Hua Yuhao and Wang Dong, but he hadn't mentioned them to her, even though he had been confiding a lot in Han Ruoruo over the past few days. At this moment, Han Ruoruo demonstrated how sweet-tempered she was. She turned her attention to Wang Yang and gave him a probing look. After 2 days of interaction, Wang Yang's love for Han Ruoruo had grown to an all-time high. Why did he like Han Ruoruo in the first place? Through all these years, he had definitely had his chances to find a partner. However, his requirements were very demanding. The greatest thing he liked about Han Ruoruo was the chemistry between them. He could understand what she was thinking with just the look in her eyes, or a simple gesture. Wang Yang laughed and replied, "It's fine to let them spar. Why don't all of you join? I don't think you know each other well. Let me give all of you a chance to officially get to know one another." The 7 of them are Bei Bei, He Kai Tu, Shu Sancha, Jiang Nannan, Xiao Xiao, Hua Yuhao, and Wang Dong. They entered the inner courtyard later than the 3 of you. However, they hold a title that I'm sure will make the 3 of you surprised. They were given the title of Shrek's 7 Monsters by the Sea God's Pavilion. This title will remain with them for life. As Wang Yang said this, Han Ruoruo, Wu Ming and Chu Qingtian were all shocked. They looked at the 7 of them with a differently now. Shrek's 7 Monsters for life. What did that mean? The Sea God's Pavilion always adopted the principles of fairness and justice, and these 7 were awarded such a prestigious title. Before the 7 of them came around, this title had only belonged to the main competing members of the academy that took part in the Continental Advanced Soul Master Academy Soul Dueling Tournament each time around. After the tournament was over, these members could retain this title for 5 years before it was taken back before the next edition of the tournament. Thus, they were extremely shocked when they heard from Wang Yang that the 7 of them had been given this title for life. Chu Qingtian was still fine with it, but Han Ruoruo and Wu Ming were once members of a team that had participated in the tournament. They were once holders of that same title, and thus they were well aware of how valuable this title was. Wu Ming was a very direct person, so she couldn't help but ask, what did they do? The academy. Wang Yang was very proud, and he replied, 5 years ago, they were all substitutes for the tournament. But before the tournament, something terrible happened. In a tragic event, one of the official team members was killed while pursuing an evil soul master. The rest were also injured to varying extents. Eventually, only Ma Xiaodao, Ling Luo Chen, and Dai Yueheng competed with injuries. Besides the 3 of them, it was only Bei Bei and the other 6. Wu Ming lost her voice. Don't tell me that they won the tournament even though they were just 15 years old then. Han Ruoruo was calm as she replied, if I'm not wrong, our academy was the champion during the last edition of the tournament, as always. Wang Yang nodded and said, she's right. During that tournament, they played the part of the main team, where not only did they obtain victory through their own abilities during the earlier rounds of the tournament, but they even gritted their teeth and emerged as the eventual champions in the later stages of the tournament. They didn't give up, and upheld our glory. They went through a lot, and brought home the title of champions. I was their teacher back then. The difficulties they went through can't be described with words. After Hu Yuhao and the rest heard his words, they looked at each other, and their eyes once again burned with reminiscent passion. It was as if they had returned to the tournament and teamed up with one another once again. They had given their best in every round. Even when they sustained critical injuries, they still gave everything they had for Shrek's glory. It was too memorable. Wang Yang continued, when they obtained the title of champions, they were all hurt to varying extents. Some of them were even gravely injured. However, Shrek's glory was preserved. Eventually, the Sea Gods Pavilion decided to award them the title of Shrek's 7 Monsters for life when they returned to the academy, after a conference was held. This matter is only known internally, but this glory belongs to them forever. If I don't remember wrongly, Xiao Xiao, Wang Donga, and Hu Yuhao were only 12 back then. Hu Yuhao only even had 2 rings then, but the 3 of them possessed twin martial souls. That was why they were selected by the academy. Wu Ming and Han Ruoruo looked at each other and saw the shock in each other's eyes. Those 3 had competed in the tournament at the age of 12. Wasn't that a record? Furthermore, they didn't sound like they were sent to compete as substitutes. They really competed. Wu Ming spoke up, Teacher Wang, I should seek more advice from the few of them after what you've mentioned. Let's see how strong they are. Wang Yang smiled and replied, I would also like to see how much they've grown after 5 years. I won't be leading the team in the upcoming tournament, so I can only see their abilities now. Bei Bei, what do you guys think? Bei Bei smiled and replied, it's our honor to receive your guidance. Teacher Wang, how do you think this sparring should be carried out? After pondering for a moment, Wang Yang said, in terms of raw ability, Ruoruo and Wu Ming have a definite advantage over you guys. Don't think that the 7 of you have an advantage just because you outnumber them. Ruoruo is a control-type Soul Doluor, and her control abilities are extremely strong. Let's do it this way. Ruoruo, Wu Ming, Qingtian, the 3 of you can fight together. Bei Bei, the 7 of you can team up together. What do you think? Bei Bei laughed bitterly. Senior Han is also fighting. That puts a lot of pressure on us. Han Ruoruo was an 8-ringed Soul Doluor. Furthermore, she wasn't some lowly soul master, but a tried and true Soul Doluor from the inner courtyard of Shrek Academy. She wouldn't be at a disadvantage even against any ordinary titled Doluor. Among the inner courtyard students, Han Ruoruo was the strongest apart from Zhong Lashuan. She was even recognized as the best at control in the inner courtyard. She had once competed in the Continental Advanced Soul Master Academy Soul Dueling Tournament with Zhong Lashuan, and her current status in the academy was definitely not inferior to Wang Yang, an inner courtyard teacher. The strongest among the current Shrek 7 monsters was only a 6-ringed Soul Emperor. While it was 7 versus 3, the opposing party had a Soul Doluor, a Soul Sage, and a Soul Emperor. They weren't easy opponents to deal with. Wang Yang smiled and said, how can we test how your cultivations have improved without any pressure? It's only a spar. Why? Are you claiming that you're really weaker? Bei Bei laughed and turned to his compatriots. He saw the burning will to compete in their eyes. Wang Yang's words hadn't been just to shock Ruoruo, Wu Ming, and Chu Qingtian. At the same time, they had reminded Shrek's 7 monsters of their memories together. 8-ringed Soul Doluor? Does that mean we can't win against them all right? Let's give it a try. Seniors, please show mercy on us. Bei Bei said to Wang Yang as he smiled. Wang Yang replied, all right, I'll be the referee then. Remember to stop when I call for it, yes. The 7 of them acknowledged his words politely at the same time, demonstrating their respect for Wang Yang. Wang Yang turned to Han Ruoruo, and she nodded at him. From the look in her eyes, he could tell that she understood him. Wu Ming was already raring to go. Come on, let's fight. Wang Yang said, although it's only a spar, it must be slightly formal. Please retreat to either side of the arena. I'll give both parties 3 minutes to discuss your team strategy before the sparring begins. Wu Ming wanted to say something else, but she was stopped by Han Ruoruo. She dragged Chu Qingtian with her as they moved back. Chu Qingtian's lethargic look seemed to have disappeared at this point. He was a little eager now, too. It was evident that his prior lethargy had been an act. However, Wu Ming was too excited now, and didn't notice his change. Both parties retreated to their positions. Bei Bei and the rest moved to the left of the arena. Han Ruoruo, Wu Ming, and Chu Qingtian retreated to the right of the arena. Bei Bei immediately arranged a setup as he looked at his compatriots. Sancha, the two of us will be at the front. Nan Nan will react from one side. He Kai Tu will be located in the center to send out long-range attacks. Xiao Xiao, you'll be in charge of helping the rest and providing control along with Yu Hao. Donga, you'll team up with Yu Hao to react to any changes. Yu Hao, you'll be the main controller. You'll guide us all in the arena. Does everyone understand the plan? Even though it had been 2 years since they had last teamed up together, their chemistry hadn't waned. This was especially evident as they were all eager to fight together. The young and inexperienced often lacked fear. Against a senior who was a Sol Doluor, it wasn't embarrassing even if they lost. Moreover, they were more likely to show their true abilities under pressure. Challenging Han Ruoruo and the other two was much more beneficial for them than fighting each other, and they could also practice all together. As they spoke, the 7 of them were already lining up in their formation. Bei Bei and Shu Sancha were in front. Jiang Nannan was to the right and slightly behind them. He Kai Tu was in the middle further behind. Xiao Xiao, Hu Yuhao, and Wang Dong formed one line with Hu Yuhao in the center. He was already holding Wang Dong's hand at this point. This wasn't a very neat formation, but they looked mighty as they stood in their positions. When Han Ruoruo and the other two turned their attention to the 7 of them, they didn't see 7 people, but a single entity. It was a complete unit. Wu Ming was already ready to fight, and she leapt excitedly to the front. Chu Qingtian followed beside and slightly behind her, doing what Jiang Nannan did. This was the most common spot adopted by an agility-type soul master. Han Ruoruo stood at the back. The 3 of them formed a simple, yet effective formation. Seeing that both parties were ready, Wang Yang shouted, "Both parties, please get ready." Suddenly, the soul rings from both parties started to rise. Blinding light started to illuminate their surroundings, and intense undulations of soul power caused the air above the sparring arena to distort. At this point, the differences in their cultivations became evident. While there were only 3 people on Han Ruoruo's side, their aura was far more overwhelming. Han Ruoruo only stood silently in place, but she gave everyone the feeling that she was the anchor of the team. Her eyes started to shine brightly. She didn't look at Bei Bei and Shu Sancha, but turned her attention directly to Hu Yuhao. Hu Yuhao only felt a strong spiritual pressure approaching him. He could clearly tell that Han Ruoruo was locking onto him. Yes, she was locking onto him. She wasn't locking onto him using a soul skill, just with her spirit. Only a control-type soul master who was at least a soul sage could perform such a spiritual lock. Under the effect of this spiritual lock, she was able to accurately predict her opponent's moves and exert immense spiritual pressure on her opponent's spiritual C. This helped her suppress her opponent. When there was a huge gap in cultivation, the effect of her spiritual lock was even greater. Not only did it restrict her opponents, but she could even enhance the results of her own abilities. Of course, it wasn't without any limitations. Once she used her spiritual lock, it also meant that her main target was Hu Yuhao. He would become her sole priority. A control-type soul master against a control-type soul master. When one side was outnumbered, it was best for them to target the control-type soul master on the opposing side first. As a top-ranked student in the inner courtyard, Han Ruoruo's abilities were undoubtedly outstanding. However, Hu Yuhao wouldn't have been specially promoted to membership in the Sea God's Pavilion if he were that easy to deal with. Hu Yuhao's eyes shone with golden light as he faced the immense spiritual pressure placed on him by Han Ruoruo. A layer of golden light soon engulfed his entire body. When the golden light shone, a dim golden fog also rose from his body. What? Han Ruoruo exclaimed slightly. She was stunned to discover that her spiritual lock had lost its effect, or rather, it had been isolated. She hadn't expected such a thing to occur, especially considering that she had 8 rings and was facing a 5-ringed opponent. Minga, be careful. Hu Yuhao's spiritual cultivation isn't below mine. How could his spiritual power be so strong? Just as Han Ruoruo was becoming perplexed, Wang Yang watched as both parties unleashed their martial souls. He shouted, "Begin." Both parties acted immediately. Wu Ming was the fastest. As she tipped her toes to the ground, she leapt forward. Her golden crow primordial fire was unleashed, and intense sparks started to illuminate the entire arena. Han Ruoruo and Chu Qingtian were completely concealed by the sparks. As she shouted and burst forward, she pointed her right hand toward the sky. Her fourth soul ring shone brightly, and a ruby ball of light the size of a longan shot into the sky. This ball of light was very small when it appeared, but it grew continuously as it ascended. When it was 30 meters from the ground, it had already grown to the size of a head. After this, it started to crash down towards Shrek's 7 monsters like a meteorite. Shrek's 7 monsters were mostly unfamiliar with Wu Ming's soul skills. Shu Sanxia took a step forward and lifted his shield of the Shenming turtle up high, preparing to resist Wu Ming's attack. Ripples spread out across the pitch-black shield. Among Shrek's 7 monsters, Huo Yuhao was an ice type, while Shu Sanxia was truly water type. His defense didn't just possess the resilience of his shield, but also the gentleness of water. At least in terms of element, his shield wasn't inferior to the Golden Crow primordial fire. However, something weird suddenly occurred. The scarlet-red fireball that was moving extremely quickly stopped in the air just as it was about to crash against the shield. After that, it made a turn and glided past it. It seemed to sweep past Bei Bei, Shu Sanxia and Jiang Nannan, and started to crash down towards He Kai-tu at the center of the formation. Her control over this soul skill was immaculate. If Wu Ming only attacked with brute force, how would she be able to reign with terror in the inner courtyard? She was truly capable. Even with Huo Yuhao's spiritual detection, he could only judge that Wu Ming was controlling her soul skill. However, he didn't know what transformation was going to happen to her soul skill. Wu Ming revealed a smile on her face. Her fourth soul skill was called the Golden Crow Primordial Fire Ring. Once it blew apart in the center of the opponent's formation, it would cause a tremendous impact and scorching effect. Even if it couldn't harm them, it could at least destroy their formation and separate them. Once their formation was disrupted, they could be dealt with individually using Han Ruoruo's control. In such a perilous situation, Shrek's 7 monsters were indeed quite frantic. After all, the 7 of them hadn't teamed up with one another for more than 2 years. All 7 of them wanted to attack at the same time, but they were lacking slightly in chemistry. However, this lack of cooperation could be made up for using their capabilities. Xiao Xiao shouted, "Let me handle it." Chemistry was built on trust. When she shouted this, the rest of the 6 didn't bother with the Golden Crow Primordial Fire Ring and continued to burst forward. A ball of black light appeared just as the Golden Crow Primordial Fire Ring crashed down. It was a huge cauldron. The cauldron was around 1.5 meters high, 1.5 meters across, and it was as heavy as a mountain. From the looks of it, the Golden Crow Primordial Fire Ring was going to crash into this cauldron. Its strength was undoubtedly going to be contained by it. However, Wu Ming controlled her soul skill again. The crashing Golden Crow Primordial Fire Ring moved 3 inches laterally before it continued to descend. This was the second shift of her soul skill. As a soul sage from Shrek Academy, Wu Ming's spiritual power was superior to most other ordinary soul sages. However, her smile froze just as she revealed it on her face. The cauldron divided into 3 components just as the Golden Crow Primordial Fire Ring moved. Wu Ming's control was limited, and so, her ring landed in one of the cauldrons. Huo Yuhao's spiritual detection couldn't judge how Wu Ming was going to control her soul skill, but he could accurately grasp the timing of her actions. Xiao Xiao's 3 lives soul crush cauldron divided at that timing, and the Golden Crow Primordial Fire Ring was caught in one of them. A loud boom resonated from the 3 lives soul crush cauldron, and the entire cauldron turned golden red. But no heat seeped out because Xiao Xiao contained Wu Ming's soul skill completely. It wasn't just one cauldron that turned red, all 3 changed color at the same time. The attacks was distributed evenly across all 3 cauldrons. Although Wu Ming's cultivation was far superior to Xiao Xiao's, it wasn't easy for her to overcome the 3 lives soul crush cauldron. Xiao Xiao's expression changed slightly before it returned to normal. As long as the 3 lives soul crush cauldron wasn't destroyed, only her soul power would be depleted. She wouldn't be hurt. She was delayed for a moment, however, and thus was now slightly behind Huo Yuhao and Wang Donga. She pointed her fingers at the 3 cauldrons, and they started to revolve rapidly. The golden red color emanating from the cauldrons also started to quickly disappear. Wu Ming's name was built on her offense. She was shocked that her 4th soul skill was resisted so easily. However, she didn't stop given her wealth of experience. As she lifted her right hand, her 2nd soul ring started to shine brightly. A golden red flame started to dance above her palm. In the next instant, an intense golden red spark started to burn around her body, bathing the entire sparring arena in a golden red light. This was Wu Ming's 2nd soul skill, Golden Crow Primordial Fire Combustion. Both parties were now only 100 meters apart. After the initial attack, the gap between both parties had been pulled closer. Bei Bei and Shu Sanxia didn't rush forward recklessly. They maintained their formation with the rest behind them. From the side, Jiang Nannan had vanished directly behind Shu Sanxia. She couldn't be located anymore. On their side, the agility-type Soul Master had disappeared behind their defense-type Soul Master. On their opponent's side, Chu Qingtian also hid behind Wu Ming. Wu Ming clasped her hands in front of her. Since her soul skills wouldn't work, she changed her strategy. A beam of golden-red fire instantly shot out from her hands. This beam of fire was almost a meter across, and shot straight towards Shrek 7 monsters. It was a direct confrontation. At this point, Huo Yuhao finally made his move. He quickly took a step forward, coming beside He Kai-tu. Bei Bei and Shu Sanxia moved to either side of him. With Huo Yuhao's spiritual detection, they didn't need to rely on sound to warn one another. The entire process proceeded smoothly, and their cohesion was great. An azure green light started to shine from Huo Yuhao's chest and belly. In the next moment, a huge beam of azure green light shot out towards Wu Ming's first soul skill, the Golden Crow Primordial Fire. While it was only Wu Ming's first soul skill, it was enhanced by her second soul skill. As both soul skills complemented each other, the air seemed to be scorched as the golden red beam of fire passed. The air started to distort, and revealed ripple-like patterns. However, this was the complete opposite of what was happening on Huo Yuhao's side. The azure green beam of light caused all the heat to be replaced with a chill. His attack clashed directly with the Golden Crow Primordial Fire. It was the Ice Empress Wrath. This was once Huo Yuhao's strongest soul skills, and it was still very effective now. Under the effect of his Haodong power and with help from Wang Donga, the depletion of his soul power was negligible. The contrasting beams of light clashed together in the air. This was also the first direct clash of abilities. Dense fog started to diffuse from the center of the collision. A piercing sound reverberated, and the two beams of light were destroyed at the same time. Neither party gained an advantage impressive. It earns its name as the ultimate ice. Wu Ming shouted as she jumped up high. A pair of golden red wings flapped open behind her back. Her martial soul was the Golden Crow, and possessed flying abilities. It wasn't a soul skill or soul tool. The Golden Crow Primordial Fire continued to be unleashed. As she flew into the air, a streak of dim golden light also flashed across. It was unleashed quickly beneath her feet towards Shrek 7 monsters. Hanruoruo had finally acted. When Hanruoruo made her move, all 7 of her foes turned serious. She was an 8-ringed Soul Doluo, the strongest opponent they had ever faced. Hanruoruo's first soul ring lit up, and the streak of golden light that came from it was like a golden line that stretched into infinity. It was like a spiritual snake that slithered forward. After it flashed beneath Wu Ming's feet, it reached Bei Bei and Shu Sanxia in the next moment. This was Hanruoruo's control-type tool soul, the Dazzling Golden Rope. The Dazzling Golden Rope was like living matter, and started to quiver towards both sides. At the same time, 2 golden rings arced out towards Bei Bei and Shu Sanxia. Bei Bei pressed his hands down, and 2 thunderous dragon claws were unleashed. Amidst reverberating booms, 2 huge claw prints were left behind on the granite layering the ground as the thunderous dragon claws struck. However, the dazzling golden rope twisted slightly before it managed to circle around them. It seemed to have eyes. At the same time, its speed didn't drop at all as it continued to loop towards Bei Bei and Shu Sanxia. Huo Yuhao made a move again. He didn't know how strong a control-type Soul Doluo was, but he was certain that this sparring would end if he allowed Hanruoruo to gain the upper hand. A purple light flashed across Huo Yuhao's eyes. Hanruoruo's body jerked slightly, and she took a step back. Her dazzling golden rope was also retracted, and arced out in a huge golden ring in the air. Yes, it was Huo Yuhao's spiritual shock, one of the few offensive soul skills of his spirit eyes. A main control-type soul master against another main control-type soul master. Huo Yuhao managed to gain a slight advantage over Hanruoruo as she was caught off guard. However, her spiritual power was indeed strong. Although she was a little lost for a moment, her eyes then started to shine brightly. A dim silvery glow shot out of her eyes, engulfing her entire body. It was yet another embodiment of her spiritual power, although it was a different color. When this layer of silvery spiritual power flowed out, Huo Yuhao felt as if she were unstoppable. However, he had still managed to buy some time for the rest. As Hanruoruo's dazzling golden rope was restricted, Shrek 7 monsters unleashed their full powers. Shu Sanxia was the first to make a move. He took a big step forward, and his shield lit up with a weird black glow. In the next instant, he flew into the air. Wu Ming was about to unleash a strike towards him when he suddenly disappeared. Shu Sanxia was displaced to her position. Mysterious Underworld Displacement. This was the soul skill that stole the limelight during the last edition of the Continental Advanced Soul Master Academy Soul Dueling Tournament. The most unique trait of this mysterious underworld displacement was its element of surprise. If caught off guard by it, it was impossible to break free once one was locked on. That was why it became one of Shu Sanxi's strongest soul skill as a defense-type soul master. For defense-type soul masters, this was a divine skill. At certain times, the mysterious underworld displacement could change the outcome of a situation entirely. Unless the opponent's soul and spiritual power were completely overwhelming his mysterious underworld displacement would never fail. Even though Wu Ming was a soul sage, Shu Sanxia was a soul emperor. He wouldn't have any confidence if he used it against Han Ruoruo, but it shouldn't be resisted easily by Wu Ming, considering her cultivation. As he was displaced, Shu Sanxia faced Chu Qingtian. Chu Qingtian saw a sly smile on his face before gloomy clouds starting to appear. The shield formed a shield wall. Following this, a huge illusory projection of a Xuanwu surfaced. In the next instant, the shield wall had converted into the shape of a turtle shell. It had a diameter of over 10 meters, and it started to crash down towards Chu Qingtian. The terrifying thing was that Chu Qingtian felt as if there were a black whirlpool in the center of the shield. A strong suction force was unleashed from this whirlpool, dragging his body towards it, and causing his speed to fall tremendously. Right now, more than one of Shu Sanxi's soul rings had lit up. Besides his second soul ring, his pitch-black fifth soul ring was also shining. His fifth soul skill was called Turtle God's Strike. This soul skill was different in that it couldn't be used on its own. This also meant that Shu Sanxi's fifth soul skill was ineffective if it was used without any other soul skills. It needed to coordinate with his second skill. He could only complete this blow by using the soul power needed to unleash these two soul skills at once. However, it was also because of this that this blow was very strong. If not for the fact that Shu Sanxia had the Xuanwu's blood lineage in his martial soul, it couldn't have been so strong. Wu Ming was also in a crisis on the other side. When Shu Sanxia struck, Bei Bei also burst forward. However, he turned back immediately after bursting a few meters out. Jiang Nannan did almost exactly the same thing as him, whereas Hu Yuhao, Wang Dong'er, Xiao Xiao and He Kai-tu completed an arc-shaped formation. When Wu Ming was displaced, she was already completely surrounded by the 6 of them. Wu Ming was in a daze as she was encircled. Shrek's 7 monsters were familiar with such a strategy and coordination. Their chemistry hadn't seemed to fall even after more than 2 years. Hu Yuhao struck her just as Wu Ming landed. He unleashed the complete version of the Dark Golden Terror Claws supported by the Ice Empress Pincer. Xiao Xiao changed to her second martial soul, the 9 Phoenix worshipping flute. Even though it only had 1 soul ring, her soul power was much superior to before. The pleasant sounds of the flute caused Wu Ming to feel dizzy, and her speed dropped significantly. Bei Bei let out a huge amount of electricity. As the vigorous thunderbolt was unleashed, it turned into an electric web that engulfed her. Wang Dong'er flapped her wings, and the light of the butterfly goddess flowed towards Wu Ming. A huge amount of golden light started to flood her body. For out of the 6 attacked, only Jiang Nannan and He Kai-tu remained where they were. Jiang Nannan was waiting for an opportunity, whereas He Kai-tu was lifting a heavy cannon to his shoulder. His target was Han Ruoruo. An intense red light flashed, and a huge ball of red light shot out into the air towards Han Ruoruo. This was a Class 6 high-power cannon shell. This kind of high-power cannon shell was extremely explosive and fiery. It could only be fired by a Class 6 high-power soul cannon, and even then, it could only be fired 3 times consecutively. The Class 6 high-powered soul cannon could only be used again after a 2-hour cooldown period, otherwise it might overheat and explode. Its offensive strength was one of the best among Class 6 soul tools. Moreover, He Kai-tu still had Hu Yuhao's spiritual detection to guide him. He didn't need to worry about his accuracy. Shrek's 7 monsters were spiritually connected at this point. Shu Sanxia had flown out and used his strong domain-type soul skill. He didn't just want to stop Chu Qingtian, he also wanted to trap Han Ruoruo. Along with He Kai-tu's cannon shell, their aim was not to kill or hurt their opponents. Rather, they wanted to delay Han Ruoruo and Chu Qingtian's assistance to Wu Ming. On the other side, the 4 of them teamed up to attack Wu Ming. However, Wu Ming wasn't easy to deal with. At such a critical moment, Wu Ming demonstrated her outstanding abilities. Her 7th soul ring lit up at this point. Instantly, she turned into a fiery golden-red lady. She let out a sonorous whistle, and her wings flapped to propel her upwards. She clashed with Hu Yuhao's Dark Golden Terror Claws. As reverberating booms sounded, the granite under Wu Ming's feet started to crack. However, she had first managed to resist the delay that the 9 Phoenix worshipping flute had imposed on her as she unleashed her Golden Crow True Body. Bei Bei's vigorous thunderbolt was also resisted by the Golden Crow True Body. As the light of the butterfly goddess landed on the Golden Crow True Body, it caused huge ripples to surface. However, it couldn't force Wu Ming back. Only the Dark Golden Terror Claws had some effect on her. Yes, this was her martial soul True Body, a powerful skill that only a soul sage possessed. Hu Yuhao and Wang Dong'er had once faced Zhao Yang's martial soul True Body. His violet gold bear had left a deep impression on them. But at this point, they realized the true terror of a martial soul True Body as Wu Ming unleashed her Golden Crow True Body. Wu Ming's aura soared, and her scorching golden crow primordial fire forced Bei Bei and Jiang Nannan to retreat a few steps. Even as she withstood the attacks of several soul skills, she wasn't at a disadvantage. Although she was surrounded, she seemed to be counterattacking. Open up! Wu Ming shouted as she revealed her strong side. Her third soul ring lit up, and she pressed her hands downward. She was about to unleash her third soul skill, the Golden Crow Primordial Fire Explosion. It was a soul skill that caused immense destruction, and was most suitable to be used when one was trapped. However, Jiang Nannan started to act at this point. As she leapt into the air, she had already arrived behind Wu Ming. A dark golden glow lit up on her body. Wu Ming was very confident in her Golden Crow true body, and thus didn't bother with Jiang Nannan at all. She believed that she wouldn't be hurt even if Jiang Nannan struck her, since she only possessed a 5-ringed cultivation. As her Golden Crow Primordial Fire Explosion was about to erupt, the 6 of them were definitely going to be blown apart. Their encirclement would also be overcome, and it would be time to chase victory once she was freed. However, Wu Ming felt something amiss as Jiang Nannan stuck close to her. The heat from the Golden Crow Primordial Fire was useless against Jiang Nannan. She didn't attack either, but only stuck close to Wu Ming. Her hands and even legs were wrapped around her. The dark golden glow turned into an intense bright gold. After this, Wu Ming's third soul ring was extinguished. The Golden Crow Primordial Fire Explosion wasn't unleashed. Jiang Nannan's 4th and 5th soul rings shone. Yes, it was the result of her 4th soul skill, Invincible Golden Body, and her 5th soul skill, Soft Bone Lock. The defensive strength of the Invincible Golden Body had increased greatly, but it still only lasted for a few seconds. As her cultivation increased, it was currently able to last for 7 seconds. The Soft Bone Lock could also seal all non-martial soul true body soul skills once the opponent was locked on, at the cost of her mobility. This video will end here. Thank you for watching.